so I am going to speak in English if that's okay. We do learn a little bit of Russian because we are flying on Russian spacecraft. So all the Americans have to go through language class, just like you. Have to get to a certain level before we can be accepted to fly on the International Space Station. We fly on the International Space Station. We've been flying on the International Space Station since 2000. Humans have been on board. You might not be aware, we've had pieces of the International Space Station start to fly in 1998. And so the space station, pieces of it have already been up there for over 15 years. But the first humans flew to the space station on a Russian Soyuz spacecraft in 2000. One American and 2 Russians. And since then, we've had continual people in space, living in space. And I was lucky enough to actually go to the International Space Station on an American space shuttle, and that was in 2006. And then more recently, I had the opportunity to fly on a Russian Soyuz spacecraft in 2012. So we have this big laboratory in space, and we have partners from Russia, of course, America, Japan, Europe, about 16 nations in Europe, and also Canada. And so we have astronauts from all of those countries that are going to space and living and working there together. And I see these nice posters on the back of the wall of all the great countries and cities that we actually got to see from space. This one, the second one, Boston, is actually my hometown. So I'm speaking a little fast, which is typical from people in the northeast of the United States. So if you want me to slow down, let me know. Is it understandable? Okay. Let's see, what to tell you a little bit more. I think we have some video of what the spacecraft look like. Is everybody familiar with the space station and the spacecraft? No. Should we show some video? A little bit. So I think the video, maybe you can help me introduce it a little bit. It shows an American space shuttle. Yes. First. Next, the Russian Soyuz spacecraft, and then living in microgravity. I think I was up there. So one thing you're going to see also is hair is really cool in space.
Really?
Yeah, it's great. Here I have to think about how I want to cut my hair. You know, I'm getting a little older, so maybe it needs a little color. But in space, it does this really cool thing, and it floats around like this, and you don't even think about a hairstyle because it just looks really cool. So I hope you get to see that, right? Is that part of it? A little bit? Okay. So if you want to show, so we have a little context, and then we can maybe all talk about your question and run the rocket up to space. It only takes about 7.5 minutes. In contrast, this is a Soyuz rocket. We are usually about, I think,
it's a real start shuttle for you.
Those are ours?
Yes, yes, yes. And this...
oh, both of those? Oh, yes. Wow.
Those are inside.
I was inside there. So this is actually, I remember this one very well. This is about 8 o'clock in the morning. So we get up at about 3 o'clock in the morning to get dressed. It takes a little while to get into your spacesuit. You have to do a pressure check, make sure it works. And then a couple hours beforehand, we go up on a ladder, on an elevator, up to the very top, actually sort of where that little horizontal line is. And that's where we are sitting way up top, 3 of us in here. In contrast, the space shuttle, we flew with 7 people. There's 2 levels, top level for the pilot and commander, and the bottom level for the, we call it the mission specialist. Here, 3 people are sitting all together. So that was about 8 o'clock in the morning for this launch, which is very smooth. This is all liquid fuel, kerosene, essentially. And so it's just like fuel in your car. There's no air bubbles. And so it's very smooth ride up. Actually, usually they have a camera inside the spacecraft, and you can see the people, and it almost looks fake. It looks like it's at a movie studio because they're just hanging out there. And you see usually a little toy in the corner. The commander gets to pick a talisman for when we fly, and our commander, Yuri Malenchenko, brought his daughter's little plastic doll with us, and so she was hanging in the corner, and then as soon as we reached space, again, 7.5 minutes later, she starts to float. And then we know we're actually in space, which is a cool indicator, because we don't have a gravity meter. So, you want to show this one? This is, we're a little bit closer. It's a little bit smaller rocket, and a little less thrust, because it's really only taking this smaller spacecraft and 3 people to space. The difference is the space shuttle, it actually can take, it's like a truck versus a mini for cars. So the space shuttle could carry big pieces with it. This Soyuz actually is primarily just to bring the people up and just a little bit more goods as well.
T-minus 40 seconds and counting.
This is also pretty close.
Internal power, separation of low power from booster, ground propellant ignited.
T-minus 30 seconds and counting.
So what's really cool about the Soyuz rocket too, this is a basic physics problem. There's nothing holding the rocket there. The rocket is only on 3 little points. It's sitting on 3 little points. And when it gets enough lift, when the power is strong enough, big weights move out and it just flies away. The Soyuz, the shuttle is a little different. You actually have to have pyro bolts that blow. So you'll see some things start to fall away as soon as the rocket lifts. And that's just because the rocket is generating enough force to lift up that those weights will then pull back. If that makes sense. It's just a balance problem. So it's very, very slick, very, very nice, what we want to call delicate way to launch a rocket. Very smart. And it's been like that for a long time. 50 years or so. This is just like the shuttle, it's also staged, so parts will fall off. So first, the 4, they call them carrots, because they're sort of shaped like a carrot, will fall off out of the steppes of Kazakhstan. And then the main part of the rocket will fall off a little harder. They will essentially burn up coming into the atmosphere, so they are not recoverable to refurbish or make into a rocket again. And we blew a hole through a cloud, so that was sort of cool. So you can see the doll in the corner, right here. And I'm sitting on the top right of the screen there. In that suit, as a matter of fact. So you can see how smooth it is. It almost looks fake. It almost does not even seem real. Who is that? So we're just getting ready right now to stage, actually, to drop those carrots off. So there might be a little bit of movement, but not much at all. Does anybody have any questions about launch?
How do you feel when there's like 10 seconds left?
So before launch, everything that you do the first time is amazing, right? And the second time you sort of know. So the first time, I think all of us who had never flown before, which was about 3 of us on board the space shuttle, we were surprised that we were actually even getting a chance to go, that it would actually happen. So when we started to launch and we really felt all that vibration, which is much more than this for the shuttle, we were laughing. We were laughing hysterically because it was like, it takes a couple seconds for things to start up. You feel the engines, just because it's a math problem. The engines are way down here, and you're up here. So when the engines start, you can feel that all the way sitting on the top, just because of the moment arm. And they usually start a couple seconds beforehand. And so the vehicle starts to shake a little bit, and we just started laughing. We were cracking, oh my God, we're going, oh my God, we're going. Once these engines start, also, there's no shutting them down. They go and you go. And so it was just fun and funny. During this launch, I think we're all a little bit more, since we all have a control panel in front of us and we're interacting exactly with the controls. And it was not my first time. I think I was a little bit more serious, thinking about what things I had to do in case we had a problem. So So a little more serious. And then finally though, both times at that 7.5-minute mark when the engine shut down and everything is quiet, everything starts to float, even like your arms, and you just, again, you start to laugh so hard because it's like, oh my God, we're actually in space, which means I can fly. So this is cool. This is a really fun, cool situation. We flew with a Japanese guy. We flew with a Japanese gentleman also as one of our partner astronauts, Aki Fushimi.
Copy.
This is the whole launch. Any other questions about launch? It's not really boring, is it? It wasn't boring for me. It was pretty cool. You can see we have books with us too, so we're monitoring if anything will go wrong at any of these stage parts of the launch, and if we have to do any actions to either come back or continue on. So that's why we have the books with us. A lot of the stuff you know by heart at this point in time because we spend about 2.5 years training. Part of the time is in the United States, part of the time is here in Russia, part in Europe, part in Canada, and part in Japan. But the majority of the time in the last 6 months is here in Russia, it's where we're learning about all the malfunctions, all the what we call off-nominal situations that could happen, particularly when we're launching and when we're coming back into, back to
5 minutes and
Earth.
7 seconds into the flight. The second stage has separated. The third stage has ignited.
These are the rockets inside the rocket is in Russian, so you should memorize all buttons, all labels, you need to see all this copied by English too.
No, it's all in Russian. So, and that's one of the big reasons actually that we learn Russian. We are operating in the Russian spacecraft, and all the buttons, all the displays are all in Russian. All of the books are in Russian. It's also a little bit of a technical language. I was mentioning before, it's not Tolstoy, so it's not like reading a diary, a novel. It's a very technical language, and some of it is acronyms. And they're engineering terms, and very similar from one spacecraft to another. So in that regard, it's not too difficult. However, when you are flying in a Russian spacecraft, you're talking to Russian mission control, and the controllers are speaking in Russian. For an example, we have ground sites. When we pass over, our orbit comes over Russia, there are ground antennas here, and during that 20 minutes or so, we are talking very fast to the controllers on the ground. And one of the big things that they're telling us is if we have a malfunction, how to turn the engine on to come back home. And when they tell you that, what they're doing is reading up the time and maybe how much the engine needs to burn and how much this a thing called the angle that you're entering into the atmosphere. And so you're writing this down very, very fast. This is all in Russian, of course, with the Russian flight control. So while you're in a Russian spacecraft, you're speaking Russian. When we get to the International Space Station, that has multiple languages, primarily English. We are talking to Mission Control in Houston, Texas, and they are speaking in English. And so most everybody has to learn English to understand them. Then we speak to Mission Control in Moscow for some of the particulars on the Russian laboratory. And then we speak to the Mission Control in Japan. Usually they're speaking in English, but sometimes concepts are difficult to relay in a foreign language. And so then they'll go back to Japanese, if we have a Japanese crew member. If we don't have a Japanese crew member, all bets are off. I won't understand Japanese. Yuri wouldn't understand Japanese. Same thing with the European flight controllers. And those guys, there's 100 languages coming out of Europe, so they've settled on speaking in English with us as well. So it's Russian. We have to learn Russian for the launch. We have to know Russian for the landing for sure, because that's the spacecraft that's
We're now at
gone
8
to
minutes
space.
after launch.
I don't think I talked about that too much. This spacecraft is docked to the space station for the whole time we're up there, and we're usually up on the space station for about 6 months. And so it is our lifeboat. So if anything bad happens, where, for example, if the space station, just like a building or your house, if you had a fire, you want to get out, right? So if you want to get out of the space station, you go into your spacecraft, and that's how you come home. And then you'll have to, again, speak in Russian quickly to talk to the flight controllers to come home. So usually there's usually 2 spacecraft that are docked to the space station at one point in time, and we rotate crews like these Soyuz every 6 months or so. That's why I have 2 patches on me. When I went up, there was already a crew of 3 there, so we joined them, and that was this patch right here, Expedition 32. While we were up there, the 3 that were already there went home, and then another crew came up, and the other 3 are represented by this patch here, which is Expedition 33. So that's 32 and 33, that's why we have multiple patches. So we just got to work. I think you saw it. It's very happy.
Thank you so much.
That's NASA TV, which is, they were translating.
9 minutes, 30 seconds. A big thumbs up.
That's just the interpretation.
First stage did separate.
How many times before space?
How many
Times
To leave out.
So, I've gone to space 2 times. The first time I was up there via the space shuttle, the American space shuttle. And that's a little bit different because the space shuttle will come up to the space station, it will dock to the space station, and then after about a week and a half, 10 days or so, it will go home. So when I'm talking to children, I say it's like a school bus. It dropped me off at a space station and went home, and then 6 months later, another space shuttle came up and picked me up and took me home. But in the meantime, there was a Soyuz docked to the space station, so if we had any problems, we could be in our Soyuz spacecraft and then come home.
What about duration? How many minutes does it take to go from the Earth to the space?
Yeah, so interesting.
How many minutes?
A lot of people ask about a normal day, and we try to keep a normal human day because it's difficult to change a 24-hour day. But we go so fast around the planet that we see 16 sunrises and sunsets in one 24-hour period. So we're flying about 28,000 kilometers per hour around the Earth. And so a normal day, which is day and night, is only about 90 minutes.
Much faster than a bullet.
Yeah. So 90 minutes to go all the way around the planet, which is pretty cool. We are flying around the planet in an orbit with an inclination, which is the angle above the equator. And so if the Earth didn't rotate, then we'd fly over the same place every time. But luckily, the Earth rotates, and the Earth is rotating below us, and so we pretty much get to see most of the planet up to about 56 degrees latitude and down to 56 degrees latitude. So there's a little bit more North Pole and South Pole that we don't get to see, only like from the side view, as we can see it. We have a beautiful window, which is called the cupola. I'm not sure if it might be on the space station video. It's a big round window about this big, and then it has 6 windows that are out to the side, and you probably see it in the video here. And so with that window you could look down, and the space station usually flies like an airplane.
I'm Sunny Williams. I'm up here on the International Space Station. No.
Maybe I'll let this narrative.
We're in Japanese.
See what I said about air?
Here on the International Space Station. It's actually on the left-hand side. If I was at the International Space Station and I was flying through space like this, my left hand would be where the Japanese laboratory is.
This is fun.
How do you feel without gravitation?
So now again, we're on the right-hand side,
Really
all the
good.
way on the right of the International Space Station.
Notice my head looks a little bit bigger.
European module.
We have a fluid
It's
shift.
Science
We'll talk
experiments
about that
all
a
over.
little
You
bit
can see it looks a little
Not
bit
just my hair, but
crowded.
my head looks
And here
bigger.
we do
I
a
don't
lot
have
of
any
our
wrinkles
mental
here.
experiments.
That don't goes away.
Module.
Cool hair.
Of course, most of these modules you see, they have 4 sides, and they're put together. That way we could sort of work on a flat plane. either a wall, a floor, another wall, or the ceiling. But you know, again, all you have to do is turn yourself and your reference changes. The reason I'm bringing that up is because this is where 4 out of 6 of us sleep. And so people always ask about sleeping in space. Do you lie down? Are you in a bed? Not really, because it doesn't matter. You don't really have the sensation of lying down. You just sit in your sleeping bag.
No alcoholic drinks.
That would be a little hard to contain, but stuff that you can inject water into. And then we also have pre-made foods with a little preservative, like American lasagna, beef fajitas, or Russian food, some type of like miasa with kasha in a can. And it's actually pretty good. And there's different ways to heat it. A can, we have a container specifically for cans, so it's like a heating element next to the can. Or actually the silver suitcase where you put this dehydrated, like, not dehydrated, but it's called irradiated food. So it has a specific way that it's got rid of all of its bacteria, and we just heat that up. So, and then we also get specialty stuff that we like from our families and friends. My mother's her roots are from Slovenia, and they were able to send up dried sausage from Slovenia for me, which was really nice. Again, I'm from Boston, so we had lobster in a can that I got. Aki had miso soup, for example, and different types of seaweed dishes that were specifically Japanese. Yuri had special Russian food. This is how the food is packaged right here. Actually, in this area, this is sort of like our kitchen area. And so we would share that all together. I think one of my favorite things was tvorog sorekami. And I had that each time before I did a spacewalk, because it was really like hearty food. It sort of sits in your stomach. And when you're on a spacewalk, you're outside, as we call outside of the space station, for about 6 to 8 hours. And so you don't have the opportunity to eat anything. You have water inside the spacesuit, but no food. So I wanted to have something that I would feel like I had then energy all day. So tvorog sorekami was my go-to food for that. So that was nice. One thing we have a lot of, these are our American spacesuits right here. I'm not sure if we show the Russian spacesuits in the back, but this area is called the airlock. And an airlock is just like this door, like usually there's 2 doors in the house, like one door and then there's a second door and then you get into the house, like typical where you take your shoes off, for example. This is an airlock because that area inside there is where we would be with our spacesuits on. And you can open the door to the outside and get rid of all of the pressure, and then you can go outside without depressurizing the inside of the spacecraft. So that's the airlock area. We would get put on our spacesuits here, and then farther in the back is where the airlock is, where we would go right outside. But one thing about food, we don't really have a lot of bread and things that have crumbs, because crumbs float all over the place, like potato chips. We had some Pringles, and when you opened the can, they were going everywhere, in your hair, in people's sleeping bags, in the toilet. It was just a mess. And so we don't really have a lot of bread. And one thing that we have a lot of in Texas is tortillas. And so we have a lot of tortillas up there, because you could just put the food inside and wrap it up and eat it, and it doesn't create a lot of crumbs all over the place. So it's a little bit different. Anything else?
Did you go to the open space?
I did. Actually, I had the opportunity to get in that spacesuit right there 3 times during this flight. And on my first flight, I did 4 spacewalks. So I've got to go outside, as we call it, a number of times. And we don't, between 2000 and about 2010, we were really constructing the space station. If you can think about it, it's a number of modules, and they're about the size of a school bus, and they're all connected together. And none of those parts were put together on Earth before we went to space. So we brought them all up there, most of them from the space shuttle. Ones from Russia were actually launched autonomously by themselves and automatically docked to the space station. Again, great technology. But on the US side, we carry them in the space shuttle. We take a robotic arm and we connect them together. And to do that also, we have to go outside, do spacewalks, to actually use big tools and drive the bolts, connect the air conditioning lines and the cooling lines, the heating lines, the electrical power lines. And so on my first flight, we were still constructing the space station. That's why I did 4 spacewalks. I was essentially construction worker, like you see outside, these guys who are building all the bridges here. My second flight, we had a... what's going on? Something else. My second flight, now that the space station is built, it's primarily built for science. So we need to make sure all of the space station works. And while we were up there, unfortunately, a big electrical circuit breaker box, about this big, we have 4 of them, stopped working. And so we had to go outside to take it off and then replace it with a new one. Also, one of our air conditioners didn't work. So just like the repairman who comes to your house, we had to go outside and work on the air conditioning system by rerouting some big, huge ammonia cables. So now spacewalks are primarily for repair. If we have something that goes wrong with the space station, we have to go out. The Russian side is actually getting ready to hopefully launch another module. And so they are doing that same preparation like we were doing in the beginning of the US side for construction. Putting power cables, putting cooling cables, getting it all ready for the new module that will come up, which is a science module. So knock on wood, that will come up. Long answer to your short question, yes, I got to go outside. And what's really cool about being outside also is the window is awesome, the cupola inside the space station, because you fly and it looks like a glass bottom boat. You're just like looking at the Earth go by or watching the universe go by. But in your own helmet, if that's the only thing between you and space, is this little glass in front of you, you can turn your head and look any way. And it's just amazing. So that's a pretty amazing view.
So what was extremely unexpected in all the space?
We practice what we're going to do in space very thoroughly. So it's like you've rehearsed it. It's rehearsal for a ballet recital or a piano recital. You know it without even thinking about it. And so then when they change the plan, change what you're going to do, things are a little unexpected. And one thing that was most unexpected to me is we had to go, at the time there was a solar array that was sticking off the top of the space station. And we had a little bit of a problem with it, so they said, would you go there and shake it a little bit to see if you can fix it? And it's a tower that's probably 2 times the size of this room. And my partner says, go first, you go first. So I started going, and my heart started beating very fast. I'm like, why am I nervous? Why am I scared? I've been out here already for 4 hours. Why am I scared now? And it's those things that are typical to humans on Earth. When you climb up a building, you get scared. It's like a fear of heights. We're already, 400 kilometers above Earth. Why, 10 more kilometers is not going to, or 5 more kilometers, or 5 more meters is not going to change anything. Why am I nervous? And it's really just because of what's in your brain. You think you're higher, you should be scared. So I closed my eyes and I imagined how it was when we practiced. And we practice in a big pool, and that's how you can sort of be floating. And when we do this in the pool, the pool is not big enough to stick up. So we lay this thing on the side and we translate not like up like this, we translate sideways like this. And so I closed my eyes and I turned my body, and I thought that I can't feel anything, just like the scene about the bedroom, the sleep stations. I can't feel anything, so now I feel like I'm just going sideways. And I wasn't scared. So it's all in your brain. It's in your mind, because there's no sensation of gravity at all. And another part of that is inside the space station, we have lights on the ceiling. Because the space station flies usually like this, like an airplane. And so everybody feels like this is up and this is down. And you fly, when I fly through the space station, I fly like this. So if you just turn yourself around and you fly like this, it's a whole new space station. It's really cool. And it's only because the lights are on the ceiling. We could put the lights on the floor, on the side. It doesn't really matter. but it's just because people are used to having lights on the ceiling on Earth. We did that for orientation, so people wouldn't get lost in the space station. So it's sort of fascinating. Your brain really knows Earth. Your brain really knows gravity. And we are born here and develop here, and that's the impression we have. So you can change it in space, which is pretty cool.
Are you scared of the flight already?
Yes and no. That's always in the back of your mind. And we have tethers that fall on our spacesuit. And so whenever you go someplace, you go to a work site, I'm going to use both my hands. First thing I do is connect that. We also, on the US spacesuits, have like a long 85-foot cable, titanium cable, that we move from one place to another. It's like when you're rock climbing, mountain climbing, with a carabiner. And so that hopefully you won't ever become disconnected. On the US suits, though, we also have a jetpack on the back, so in case you did fall away, you can activate a little control arm and then fly back to the space station. And we practice that in a virtual reality lab where you have goggles and you can see the space station in, like, the universe in your goggles, and they actually push you off and then you practice flying back. Now remember, this jetpack only has a bottle of gas of about this big, so it only has so much, and so you practice in it. First time generally you'll miss, and you'll fly away. And just sitting in a chair with this virtual reality goggles on, you become so nervous and sweating because you don't want to miss. Because if you miss, you're done. Like the movie, Gravity. So we don't want to do that. So you practice and then you get very good at it. And you only do it once a month because spacewalks are very rare. And so you don't have a lot of time to practice between times. So you know that you can do this if you had to. But first and biggest impression is don't ever let go. It would be not such a fun day. So we always use that tether. And whenever we get to someplace, we'll tether ourselves. So yeah, it does get scary sometimes.
Is it hard? Is it hard to feel gravitation after you fly?
Yeah, so it's a little strange when you come home. The thing what do you think is the most heavy thing on your body? Any idea? Your head. Yes, exactly. And you know, if for all this time, you know, you're like flying around like a bird, and you're not thinking about it, your head's like, woo. And then when you come back, when you first stand up, it's like, a very good friend of mine, he came in the airplane, in the Gulfstream airplane to pick us up in Kazakhstan. And he's like, Sunny, we're here! We're so happy to see you! And I was like, Dick, I see it's your shoes. And I can't lift up my head. I said, after I lay down, come back. And I actually had to lay down and then put my head back before I could see. And it just takes about a day or so, but all this muscles, you don't realize right now, you're holding your head up. You don't even realize that your muscles are active right now and it's holding your head. So the first thing, this thing is very, very heavy. We do a lot of exercise up on the space station. We have a treadmill. We have a bicycle that has no seat, because you don't sit. You don't have to sit on anything. All you do is clip your feet into the pedals, like the clipless pedals. And then we also have a weightlifting machine where we can do squats and like deadlifts. And the reason we do this is because, of course, your muscles start to go away. You don't need to have muscles to walk around. So they start to deteriorate, so you have to keep them active. And also your bones start to go away, particularly in your hips and in your feet, because nothing's stimulating them, as there's none of this walking around stimulation, none of the gravity pushing down on it. And so that's why we do a lot of jogging to stimulate that and weightlifting to make sure those bones are okay. So when we come back from Earth, everybody's actually coming back in really good shape because they allocate 2 hours of time that we can work out. And so people, I mean, how many people get 2 hours a day with their job to work out? Not many. So people in space are getting this good time, and so people are coming back very fit and very well in shape. So no problem walking. it's just other aspects. There's one thing called neurovestibular, and so if you turn your head real fast, you'll probably fall over when you come back from space right away, because essentially your balance is from your inner ear, and it's not had that stimulation because it's actually based on fluid in your inner ear that's just floating around for 6 months in space. So when you come back to Earth, it sits back down again, and your brain will take about 24 hours to 48 hours to figure that out again, and then you won't have the tendency to fall back. So we do a lot of exercises for agility, like walking like this when we come back, and like this, and it's very difficult. And here it seems very easy to do those types of things, but when you first come back to space, that's very, very hard. And it takes like 24 hours to get your brain recalibrated to understand that.
And what about feeling of time? Was it changed without meditation?
No. Disappointing. I was wishing I would come back and be 10 years younger, but nothing of the sort, unfortunately. So time, unfortunately, it flies because we're very busy up there, but nothing like its time went away. Yes, sir.
When you left your mind, for example, you don't have control of the situation. And maybe, do you have any experience when you listen to your soulmate, for example, or what do you think? Soul exists or not?
Oh, I'm sure. There's definitely times on the spacecraft when you're launching that you really have limited control. There is actually some things. There's some times that there's really nothing that you can do. The spacecraft will work automatically if it's going to work correctly. And say on launch there's a malfunction. It has a launch abort system that will pull you away from the rest of the rocket. But maybe that works, maybe that doesn't work. So sure, there's some times in space, sometimes when you're out on a spacewalk. Just recently, not my spacewalk, but another gentleman, their suit had a malfunction. The suit is actually a spacesuit. So the suit had a malfunction where it was pouring water into the back of the helmet. And when I say pouring water, it's not like, oh, my back is getting wet. So what happened is the water is all coming up and forming a big glob on his head, and then came over his eyes, and potentially could have essentially drowned him in the spacesuit. So yeah, there are some things that we don't know, and that's, I think, why we go to space, because we can't simulate, we can't test all that on the ground, so you have to have a little faith in the people who have engineered these things, and that it will be okay, and that your training will allow you to understand a malfunction situation and do the right things, and hopefully be okay. So I think there's definitely a little bit of feeling of something bigger than us. Absolutely.
You don't believe?
I believe, yes.
And aerospace also.
What's that?
In general, the aerospace has a mind maybe, because I listen to the other flyers, somebody think that the sky or aerospace has a mind. Sometimes they help astronauts.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. I have to think about that a little bit more. I don't know.
Have you ever met extraterrestrials in this space? Or extraterrestrials, aliens?
It's a secret. We can't tell you.
Okay, top secret.
No, honestly, unfortunately, no. But particularly when I'm talking to kids, and they always want to ask about aliens and extraterrestrials. One thing you really see is actually how many stars are in the universe. Here on Earth, depending upon where you are, you have no knowledge of how many there are, because our skies are cloudy sometimes. Our skies have a lot of water vapor, which makes our vision a little bit blurry into the universe. But in space, when we're outside of our atmosphere, there's millions of stars, I guarantee you.
So there is no dark, it's not dark space?
There are some dark areas, yes, but there are millions and millions of stars, and what's really incredible about seeing stars in space is you can see some are closer than others, some are farther. You can actually have it feels more 3D. It doesn't feel like when you're at a planetarium and everything's just a black ceiling and then there's little lights. It doesn't feel like that. It definitely feels like it goes on and on and on. And so you have to have that feeling like there's got to be another star out there that has planets like ours. There's got to be. So there's got to be something else. Maybe it might not look like a human being, but something else is, I'm sure, is out there. So yeah, I believe that they're out there. We're just too close to home, and I think they're too afraid to come too close to us. Yes, ma'am.
Did you see Gravity movie, and is it possible from the point of view of physics?
No. Yes, I did see the movie, and it was a beautiful movie, and some beautiful scenery, and some amazing spacecraft, but no, it's not possible. So what's not... but what's not possible about it is all of the spacecraft that they talked about, like the space station, the Hubble Space Telescope, and the Chinese space station, they're all in different orbits. And it's extremely hard. You don't have enough fuel on any spacecraft to just go from one spacecraft to another orbit, to one orbit to another orbit. You have to be in the same orbital plane, and then you can go higher above, or you'll eventually come back toward Earth. But to switch planes there's too much fuel, so that wouldn't happen. But I will say, you can ride the vacuum cleaner in the space station. So you turn the vacuum cleaner on and make the thing go like this, and you can ride around like a witch. So I have never tried a fire extinguisher, and it's enclosed in space, so you wouldn't want to use a fire extinguisher inside the space station unless you had some type of breathing mask on. It wouldn't, but it probably would push you. It would propel you. They tell us if we ever had a fire, if you're shooting the fire extinguisher, first make sure you have a mask on, and then hold on to the wall, because it'll probably push you back. And I know the vacuum cleaner works, so that's sort of fun. Yes, sir.
A question on behalf of Sasha. He wants to fly to cosmos, or to space, and he wants to know how you become an astronaut.
Yeah. So I was asked a little bit earlier today, in particular, there's going to be another woman cosmonaut coming up to fly in space pretty soon. She actually was working at Energia, the company that makes the Soyuz spacecraft. My background is also an engineer. I am a helicopter pilot and flew in the Navy. So we have a lot of people who are military, who are pilots, and jet pilots or helicopter pilots. For Russia, that's the same. They also have we have engineers. Russia also has engineers. With the beginning of the space shuttle program, we opened up our applications even further. So we have any type of scientist, physicist, chemist, any engineer. We also have doctors. Russian Space Agency also has doctors who fly in space. We have a veterinarian. We're getting ready to do a bunch of experiments on mice up in space, live mice. So his skills come in very handy for us.
Do you apply to a program, or are you recruited?
A little of both. I think for the Russian Space Agency, this last time was the first time they put the application out to everybody. It was on the internet. But before, I think it was a little bit more recruited. For the U.S., it's an open application that goes out when we need astronauts. So usually it's probably every 2 to 4 years. The Corps starts to shrink, and then we need to have more people come in. So I would suggest people have a background in science or math, and are interested in flying, because there's a lot of flying skills. Like when we dock the Soyuz to the space station, we're essentially using flying skills with a stick, which provides pitch, roll, and yaw to the spacecraft, and then a translational hand controller which goes in, out, left, right, up, and down. So those are flying skills that everybody needs to have if you're thinking about being a cosmonaut. We also have robotic arm, and the robotic arm uses